The impact of military tactics. The history of warfare is to a large extent a history of military tactics that shaped not only battlefields but also the course of history itself. When we talk about tactics, we refer to the maneuvers and decisions made in the heat of combat, aiming for swift and decisive victories. While strategy involves the overall planning of a war, tactics pertain to how specific battles are fought and how each decision can influence the outcome of a conflict. On many occasions, a brilliant or innovative tactic determined the result of a war. The choice to use a specific battle formation, a combination of forces at strategic points, or even adapting to the terrain conditions could be the key to victory. Some tactics became historical milestones, transforming leaders into legendary figures and altering the course of global power. It is intriguing to observe that, over centuries, military tactics have evolved in response not only to advancements in weaponry and technology, but also to the cultural, political, and geographical conditions of each era. A great strategist is not just someone who knows their forces well, but also someone who can understand the enemy's psychology, anticipate their reactions, and use this to their advantage. In this video, we will explore some of the most decisive tactics in history, examining how each changed the course of wars and cemented historical figures. Along the way, we will see how adaptation, speed, and the ability to innovate on the battlefield are always essential ingredients for military success. The cavalry charge tactic, Battle of Gaugamela. The Battle of Gaugamela, fought in 331 BCE, is one of the most iconic examples of how a well-executed tactic can determine the fate of a war. The commander responsible for this tactic was Alexander the Great, whose innovative use of heavy cavalry became a reference point in ancient military strategy. The battle took place between Alexander's army and the vast Persian Empire under King Darius III and is often regarded as one of the greatest military feats in history. The key to Alexander's success was his ability to adapt his formation and mobility. Instead of engaging the enemy head-on in a frontal assault, he employed a flexible maneuver with his forces. During the battle, Alexander concentrated his forces on the right flank, with the heavy cavalry, the companions, advancing aggressively, while the infantry maintained a more traditional battle line. By intentionally creating a gap in the center of his army, he lured Darius into attacking this seemingly vulnerable spot, which was a strategic trap. At the right moment, Alexander and his cavalry struck the Persian flanks with relentless force, encircling the enemy army. The success of Alexander's tactic lay not only in his use of cavalry, but also in his ability to maneuver quickly and identify enemy weaknesses. The cavalry charge not only disrupted the Persian lines, but also caused panic among Darius' troops, who began to flee en masse. The psychological pressure, combined with the effectiveness of Alexander's maneuvers, resulted in a decisive victory, leading to the Persian Empire's loss of military supremacy in the Middle East. The impact of Gaugamela was profound. By defeating a much larger army, Alexander solidified his reputation as a strategist and military commander, and the cavalry charge tactic became a model for generations of leaders. Additionally, this victory was crucial in establishing the Macedonian Empire, which expanded to become one of the largest empires of antiquity, dominating vast regions of Asia and North Africa. Gaugamela serves as a clear example of how tactical adaptation, combined with boldness and psychological control of the enemy, can transform a leader into a historical figure and change the course of a war. The wedge formation of Napoleon Bonaparte, Battle of Austerlitz. Napoleon Bonaparte is widely recognized as one of history's greatest military strategists, and the Battle of Austerlitz, fought on December 2nd, 1805, is a classic example of his tactical brilliance. Known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, as it involved the armies of Austrian Emperor Francis I and Russian Tsar Alexander I, Austerlitz demonstrated Napoleon's ability to manipulate the battlefield and enemy expectations with remarkable precision. One of the most notable tactics employed by Napoleon in this battle was the wedge formation. The French army was positioned with a relatively weak central line, leading enemy commanders to believe they were facing a vulnerable position. Instead of placing his forces in the center of the line, as was traditional, Napoleon deliberately weakened the center of his army as a kind of bait to draw the adversary's attack. In doing so, he created the illusion that the French center was in trouble, while secretly concentrating his forces on the flanks, ready for a decisive counterattack. What followed was a masterful maneuver. As the Russian and Austrian armies surged into the center of the line, expecting an easy victory, Napoleon used his elite forces and cavalry to strike from the flanks, enveloping the enemy on both sides. This not only destabilized enemy lines, but also forced a disorganized retreat. The speed and aggressiveness of the action created panic among Austrian and Russian forces, who, overwhelmed, could not regroup effectively. Napoleon also used the terrain to his advantage. The battle took place in an area of gentle hills, and Napoleon knew that controlling the high ground would give an advantage for maneuvering his flanks and obscuring the enemy's view. With this tactic, Napoleon not only achieved a crushing victory, but also demonstrated his mastery of timing and spatial control on the battlefield. The impact of Austerlitz was profound and immediate. The victory established Napoleon as France's undisputed leader, significantly weakened the powers of the Third Coalition, Austria, Russia, and others, and shifted the balance of power in Europe. This battle became famous for how Napoleon manipulated the enemy's perceptions and exploited the coalition's lack of coordination. He demonstrated that rather than simply overpowering a larger enemy, a well-planned tactic and flexibility in command could create conditions for defeating seemingly superior forces. At Austerlitz, Napoleon not only showcased the effectiveness of flanking maneuvers, but also reinforced the importance of inducing the enemy to make predictable moves, thereby controlling them psychologically. Napoleon's famous wedge tactic would become one of the most studied and emulated in military history. Trench warfare, World War I. World War I marked a turning point in military history, representing a radical shift in the way wars were fought. The introduction of trench warfare, especially on the Western Front, completely altered battle dynamics and created an unprecedented war of attrition where the line between attack and defense became blurred and progress was measured in meters rather than kilometers. With the advent of modern weapons such as machine guns, heavy artillery, and poisonous gas, traditional tactics of mobility and combat formations quickly proved ineffective. The war of movement gave way to the construction of trenches, long lines of fortifications dug into the ground, providing protection from enemy fire and creating nearly impenetrable defenses. These trenches were not merely holes in the earth, but complex systems that included reserves, communication lines, and support points, all designed to withstand constant artillery barrages and machine gun fire. Stretching for hundreds of kilometers, primarily between France and Belgium, the trenches locked Allied and German forces in a years-long stalemate. The tactics of trench warfare severely limited mobility. Each attack, typically preceded by massive artillery bombardments, aimed to destroy enemy fortifications and create breaches for infantry to advance. However, due to the strength of the trenches and the power of machine guns, these offensives often proved futile, resulting in heavy casualties and minimal territorial gains. The most emblematic battles of trench warfare, such as Verdun, 1916, and the Somme, 1916, highlighted the brutality of this new form of combat. At Verdun, the French valiantly resisted a massive German offensive, while at the Somme, British forces attempted to break German lines with massive bombardments and infantry assaults, resulting in over 1 million casualties from minor territorial advances. The psychological toll of trench warfare was also devastating. The constant threat of attacks, the presence of corpses and wounded soldiers, toxic gas, and shortages of supplies contributed to a sense of stagnation and despair among troops. Another critical aspect of trench warfare was the use of poisonous gas. Introduced by the Germans in 1915, agents like mustard gas caused horrific injuries and slow deaths, transforming warfare into an even more horrifying experience. In response, gas masks were developed, but they only mitigated the effects, failing to completely prevent deaths from asphyxiation. Despite its immense destructiveness and apparent stalemate, trench warfare also spurred the development of new military tactics and technologies. The introduction of tanks by the British in 1916 was a direct response to the impasse of trench warfare. Capable of traversing muddy terrain and withstanding machine gun fire, tanks were initially seen as a solution to breach enemy lines. Although early models were slow and unreliable, their technology continued to evolve throughout the war, fundamentally altering the nature of battles by the conflict's end. Trench warfare also introduced the concept of attrition warfare, where the objective was not necessarily to achieve decisive victory, but to wear down the enemy's capacity to resist. The powers involved sought to undermine the enemy's morale and inflict continuous damage, often without significant territorial gains. This type of warfare led to prolonged and bloody battles of attrition, where the human cost was immense, but strategic changes were slow and incremental. In conclusion, trench warfare during World War I represented a break from traditional combat methods and introduced a type of warfare that prioritized collective effort and constant attrition. It was a tactic that not only shaped the course of the war, but also provided fundamental lessons about the limitations of conventional warfare and the need for innovation to overcome strategic stalemates. Blitzkrieg, World War II, and the invasion of Poland. The Blitzkrieg tactic, or lightning war, revolutionized the way military conflicts were waged in the 20th century, especially during World War II. Developed by the German armed forces, Blitzkrieg was not merely a combat technique, but a philosophy of warfare aimed at the rapid and decisive destruction of the enemy using mobility, surprise, and the coordinated use of mechanized forces. The first major demonstration of Blitzkrieg was the invasion of Poland in September 1939, marking the beginning of World War II. Blitzkrieg was based on the combined use of tanks, bomber aircraft, fighter planes, and motorized infantry, all coordinated to attack weak points in the enemy's line and rapidly destabilize their forces. The central concept of Blitzkrieg was to strike with speed and force, breaking through enemy lines and exploiting the breach to completely disrupt the adversary's defenses. Instead of engaging in protracted battles of attrition, as in World War I, the Germans aimed to demoralize the enemy and defeat them before they could react. During the invasion of Poland, the Wehrmacht German army executed this strategy with deadly precision. The attack began with massive aerial bombardments that destroyed Polish communication centers and defensive positions, creating panic and disorganization. Simultaneously, panzer tanks, known for their speed and protection, advanced quickly through Polish lines, taking advantage of the confusion caused by the airstrikes. Motorized infantry followed close behind, capturing cities and strategic positions before the Polish forces could reorganize. The critical aspect of Blitzkrieg was rapid maneuvering and coordination among different units. Panzer divisions could be quickly moved from one area to another, creating the impression that the German army was everywhere at once. The speed of the attack was one of its greatest strengths, preventing the Poles from mounting an effective defense. Additionally, the use of combat aircraft like the infamous Stukas to bomb strategic positions and instill psychological terror was vital in disorienting enemy defenses. Blitzkrieg was effective because it relied heavily on the psychology of the enemy. The Poles, like other armies opposing Germany, were prepared for a more conventional war with static fronts and prolonged battles. However, the speed at which the Germans moved and attacked, combined with the surprise of seeing a significant number of tanks and aircraft in action, left the Poles unable to react or mount an effective defense. The invasion of Poland, completed in just 6 weeks, demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of Blitzkrieg. Although Poland had the support of France and the United Kingdom, the Allies could not provide timely assistance, primarily because of the speed of the German advance. Poland's defeat highlighted the Germans' tactical superiority and the coordinated use of mechanized and aerial forces, which swiftly neutralized any attempts at organized resistance. The impact of Blitzkrieg was far-reaching, permanently altering the way wars would be conducted. This tactic was successfully employed in other campaigns of World War II, including the invasion of France in 1940, where the rapid advance of German troops caused the complete collapse of French defenses. The use of mechanized forces and the breakdown of static warfare meant that, from then on, war would be far more dynamic, emphasizing mobility and quick decision-making. In terms of legacy, Blitzkrieg not only changed the course of World War II, but also influenced the development of post-war military tactics, highlighting the importance of speed, surprise, and coordination between different branches of the armed forces. Although initially effective, Blitzkrieg also exposed the limitations of lightning warfare, especially when the enemy adapted and implemented more robust defenses. Island hopping, the Pacific Campaign. The Pacific Campaign during World War II was marked by relentless fighting between the United States and the Japanese Empire, characterized by brutal battles, vast naval movements, and innovative tactics. One of the most significant strategies adopted by the Allies was island hopping, a tactic that allowed the U.S. to advance across the Pacific without having to conquer every heavily defended island, conserving time and resources while isolating key Japanese control points. The island hopping strategy was centered on capturing key islands critical for supply lines, communication, and control of Japanese forces. These islands served as forward operating bases for launching future attacks. The fundamental premise of this strategy was to avoid a linear progression of battles across all islands and instead focus on those with the highest strategic value, such as airfields and ports. Once captured, these islands were used to cut off enemy supply lines and isolate Japanese forces. One of the most notable successes of this tactic was the Battle of Guadalcanal, 1942-43, where American forces seized Guadalcanal, disrupting a crucial communication route between Japan and its Pacific colonies. The victory was hard-fought, as the Japanese fiercely resisted, employing complex defensive systems, but the outcome was decisive. By taking Guadalcanal, the U.S. established a strategic foothold for launching further operations in the Pacific, significantly weakening Japan's position. Following Guadalcanal, the U.S. continued its island-hopping strategy, highlighted by battles such as Iwo Jima, 1945, and Okinawa, 1945, both essential for achieving dominance over Japan. Iwo Jima, heavily fortified with underground bunkers and defended by 20,000 Japanese troops, became a symbol of the brutal and costly nature of the campaign. The battle lasted 36 days and resulted in heavy casualties for both sides. Nevertheless, its capture was vital, providing a base for B-29 bombers to launch strategic raids on Japan. Okinawa, the final major obstacle before a potential invasion of mainland Japan, saw one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Fought between April and June 1945, it involved over 300,000 American troops and 100,000 Japanese soldiers. The Japanese committed their remaining resources to defend the island, resulting in over 200,000 deaths, including civilians. Despite the staggering human cost, the American victory at Okinawa was a crucial turning point, paving the way for the Allied victory in the Pacific. The success of the island-hopping strategy extended beyond military victories. It was also a form of strategic isolation. By bypassing heavily defended islands and focusing on key positions, the U.S. disrupted Japanese supply lines and communication, rendering many Japanese forces stranded and ineffective. This approach minimized the need for protracted battles, saving American lives and resources compared to the more attritional warfare seen in Europe. Ultimately, the island-hopping tactic played a pivotal role in Japan's defeat and was one of the first military campaigns to demonstrate the effectiveness of concentrated and rapid attacks on vital points rather than traditional, large-scale combat. This strategy allowed the U.S. to gain a position of strength, culminating in Japan's surrender in 1945 after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Guerrilla warfare, Viet Cong resistance in the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was a conflict that not only challenged the superpowers of the time, the United States and the Soviet Union, but also became a classic example of how guerrilla warfare can be effective against technologically superior and numerically stronger armies. The tactics used by the Viet Cong, a communist guerrilla force supported by North Vietnam, were a decisive factor in resisting the U.S. military, which was equipped with heavy weaponry and superior logistics. Guerrilla warfare is characterized by rapid attacks, ambushes, constant mobility, and the use of familiar terrain to wear down the enemy. In Vietnam, the varied terrain, including dense forests, swamps, and mountains, provided a crucial advantage for the guerrilla fighters. They exploited their local knowledge to carry out stealthy attacks and ambushes, making it extremely difficult for U.S. troops, accustomed to conventional warfare, to adapt. The Viet Cong relied heavily on surprise, attacking swiftly and retreating before the enemy could respond. This unpredictability left U.S. soldiers vulnerable, despite their technological superiority. The Viet Cong's strategy was one of attrition. The aim was not to win decisive battles, but to make the cost of the war, both in human and material terms, so high that the United States would ultimately withdraw. The prolonged duration of the conflict, which lasted over a decade, demonstrated the effectiveness of patience and persistence, hallmarks of guerrilla warfare. One of the Viet Cong's most infamous tactics was the use of traps and landmines, such as the notorious bouncing Betty mines and bamboo spike traps. These improvised weapons were not only effective in causing immediate casualties, but also served to demoralize American troops, creating a constant atmosphere of fear. Guerrilla fighters also employed explosive devices in unpredictable ways, hindering the movement of U.S. forces, who could not trust even the most innocuous paths. The Viet Cong's use of underground tunnels, such as the Cu Chi tunnel system, was another critical innovation. These tunnels allowed guerrilla fighters to move undetected, store supplies, and plan attacks without exposure to enemy forces. From these subterranean bases, the Viet Cong launched attacks and escaped before American forces could retaliate. This use of underground infrastructure showcased their adaptability to the terrain and the asymmetric nature of the conflict. Guerrilla warfare also depended on psychological and logistical support from the local population. The Viet Cong used their ties to the civilian population to hide, gather intelligence, and recruit new fighters. Vietnam's deep divisions between supporters of the Saigon regime, backed by the U.S., and sympathizers of North Vietnam created a complex dynamic. Despite their superior military strength, the U.S. was unable to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people, a critical factor in their eventual withdrawal. Massive U.S. bombing campaigns, such as Rolling Thunder, failed to neutralize the Viet Cong. The destruction of Vietnam's infrastructure did not deter the guerrillas, who continued their resistance with resourcefulness and resilience. After years of heavy bombing and ground offensives, the United States could not achieve a decisive victory over the guerrillas. The Vietnam War ended with the withdrawal of U.S. forces in 1973 and the fall of Saigon in 1975, consolidating the victory of North Vietnam and the Viet Cong movement. The guerrilla warfare tactics employed during this conflict not only determined its outcome, but also served as a model for resistance movements worldwide, from Africa to Latin America. In summary, the Vietnam War vividly demonstrated the challenges of fighting a guerrilla force familiar with the terrain, operating with decentralization, and committed to a cause. The Viet Cong's tactics, rooted in mobility, surprise, and attritional strategies against a technically superior enemy, proved effective in creating a prolonged and unsustainable conflict for the United States. Desert warfare, the First Gulf War. The First Gulf War, 1990 to 1991, serves as a classic example of how modern technology and precision warfare can redefine tactics and strategies in conflict. Following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, led by Saddam Hussein, the international coalition, led by the United States, showcased how a mechanized army equipped with cutting-edge technology, such as stealth aircraft, satellite communication, and precision-guided weaponry, could achieve rapid and decisive victories. The war was characterized by tactics that prioritized swift, targeted, and overwhelming strikes to neutralize the enemy's capabilities before they could effectively respond. The coalition's response to Iraq's aggression was encapsulated in Operation Desert Storm, a large-scale military offensive that began with an intense aerial bombardment campaign followed by a rapid ground invasion. The first phase, the air campaign, was designed to dismantle Iraq's military infrastructure, including command centers, supply depots, and air defense systems. Using stealth aircraft like the F-117 Nighthawk, which evaded Iraqi radar, the coalition delivered precision strikes against high-value targets, disorienting Iraqi forces and severely crippling their ability to coordinate a response. Simultaneously, psychological warfare played a significant role. Coalition forces leveraged their technological superiority to broadcast messages demoralizing Iraqi soldiers and emphasizing their imminent defeat. This approach, combined with the precision and effectiveness of weapons like Tomahawk missiles, created a sense of inevitability that led to mass desertions and a collapse of Iraqi morale. Following the 6-week air campaign, the coalition launched its ground offensive, advancing with unprecedented speed. U.S. and allied forces, equipped with M1 Abrams tanks and heavily mechanized units, capitalized on the flat and open desert terrain, allowing for rapid movements and overwhelming firepower. The use of advanced communication systems ensured seamless coordination between units, resulting in a ground campaign that lasted only 100 hours. The coalition also employed a strategy of envelopment, known as the left hook, which involved a wide flanking maneuver through the desert to bypass heavily fortified Iraqi positions in Kuwait. This maneuver allowed coalition forces to encircle and trap Iraqi troops, cutting off their retreat and forcing a surrender. The speed and precision of the offensive rendered the numerically superior Iraqi forces ineffective, as they were unable to regroup or mount a counteroffensive. Intelligence and surveillance were critical to the coalition's success. Satellites, reconnaissance aircraft, and radar systems provided near real-time information on Iraqi troop movements, enabling commanders to make informed and timely decisions. This technological edge further reduced the Iraqi military's ability to adapt or resist, showcasing the growing importance of intelligence in modern warfare. The outcome of the First Gulf War was a decisive victory for the coalition. Within just over a month, Iraqi forces were expelled from Kuwait, and Saddam Hussein's military was significantly weakened. The war highlighted the transformative role of technology in warfare, where precision strikes, real-time intelligence, and advanced logistics enabled swift and low-cost military operations. In conclusion, the First Gulf War demonstrated how desert warfare could be won not through brute force alone, but through a combination of advanced technology, rapid tactics, and psychological operations. It set a precedent for future military conflicts, where the integration of technological superiority and strategic innovation became essential for success. Cyber warfare, the future of conflicts. The 21st century has introduced a new dimension to warfare: cyber warfare. As society becomes increasingly reliant on digital technology, cybersecurity has emerged as a critical battleground where nations compete for control over information, infrastructure, and critical systems. Although still in its infancy, cyber warfare has already proven its potential to alter the dynamics of military conflicts and international politics. Instead of tanks, planes, or soldiers, cyber warfare employs codes, viruses, and attacks on digital systems to disrupt an enemy's infrastructure and undermine its combat capabilities. One of the earliest and most notable examples of cyber warfare occurred in the 2000s with the Stuxnet malware attack. This sophisticated cyber weapon was designed to sabotage Iran's nuclear program, targeting industrial control systems to cause physical damage to nuclear centrifuges. The attack demonstrated the ability of cyber warfare to disrupt critical infrastructure without any conventional military engagement, underscoring its transformative potential. Cyber warfare is notoriously difficult to trace and attribute. Attackers can operate anonymously or through proxies in third-party countries, complicating efforts to determine responsibility. This ambiguity makes cyber warfare an attractive option for state and non-state actors alike, as it minimizes the risk of direct retaliation. The covert nature of cyber attacks poses significant challenges for diplomacy and defense, as responses are often delayed or politically contentious. Major powers like the United States, Russia, and China have invested heavily in cyber capabilities. Russia, in particular, has been accused of conducting large-scale cyber attacks, including interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election through phishing, bots, and disinformation campaigns. Tactics such as distributed denial of service, DDoS, attacks which overwhelm systems and render them inoperable, and the spread of disinformation have been used to destabilize democracies and influence political events in adversary nations. Cyber warfare extends beyond military or government targets. Critical infrastructure, such as power grids, banking systems, and hospitals, has become a primary focus. In 2007, Estonia experienced a massive cyber attack targeting its banking, government, and communication systems. This event paralyzed the country for days, illustrating how cyber warfare can disrupt economies and societies without physical conflict. One advantage of cyber warfare is its cost-effectiveness and low visibility compared to traditional military campaigns. There is no need for expensive weaponry or deployed troops, and attacks can be launched without formal declarations of war. This accessibility makes cyber warfare appealing to non-state actors, such as terrorist groups and hacktivists, who can inflict significant damage with limited resources. As a response, global powers are enhancing their cyber defenses. The United States has established the U.S. Cyber Command to protect its networks and conduct offensive cyber operations, while NATO has developed cybersecurity protocols involving its member states. Cybersecurity and the protection of digital systems have become essential components of modern military strategy. In summary, cyber warfare is an emerging and complex battlefield where digital attacks can paralyze economies, spread disinformation, and compromise national security, often without a single shot being fired. As technology continues to evolve, cyber warfare is likely to play an increasingly prominent role in future conflicts, forcing nations to adapt their strategies and capabilities to address this invisible yet formidable threat. The evolution of military tactics and the future of war. The history of military tactics reveals a constant process of adaptation and evolution in response to new technologies, geopolitical changes, and the demands of the times. From the formidable Roman legions to contemporary cyber warfare, the tactics employed in battles and wars have shaped not only the outcomes of conflicts, but also the development of human society. The shift from brute force strategies to rapid maneuvers, psychological warfare, and now digital attacks reflects humanity's ability to adapt to the challenges of each era. Looking at the examples discussed, the Battle of Gaugamela, Blitzkrieg in World War II, island hopping in the Pacific, guerrilla warfare in Vietnam, and modern cyber warfare, a clear trend emerges. Tactics have evolved from prolonged military confrontations involving large armies to swift, decisive attacks often involving stealth, psychological manipulation, or digital disruption. Each tactic has adjusted to the unique conditions of its time, highlighting the importance of innovation in military success. The future of military tactics seems to be moving toward an even greater reliance on technology. Drones, artificial intelligence, and autonomous robots are becoming commonplace on battlefields, while hybrid warfare, combining conventional attacks with cyber assaults, propaganda, and subversion, reflects the complexities of modern conflict. The ability to wage war in unconventional ways, blending multiple domains of combat, land, air, cyber, and psychological, is becoming increasingly essential. Nevertheless, history teaches us that no matter how much technology evolves, human factors remain decisive. Leadership, morale, motivation, and public support continue to be critical elements for success in any conflict. While tactics may change, war remains, ultimately, a contest of willpower and the ability to exploit the enemy's weaknesses. As technology continues to advance and conflicts grow more dynamic and unpredictable, understanding past military tactics and applying them to contemporary scenarios will be essential for future military leaders. The future of war will be deeply intertwined with new technologies, but it will always, at its core, be a human struggle for dominance.